What's up, everyone? This is Franco from Hear Me Out Podcast. I have a very special guest here for you guys. It's Dave Sparia. Others of you might know him as the Radical Independent. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, Bruno, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so what I like to ask people when they're on here for the first time is what motivated them to start their channel? So, Dave, what motivated you to start the Radical Independent YouTube channel?
Just real tired of stale perspectives out there, whether they be on the left or the right. There's just a number of talking points that I continue to hear over and over again, and I felt that there's a good portion of the country that doesn't necessarily line up with either the Democrats or the Republicans, and whether you're, say, left of center but independent or right of center independent, I'm thinking that there are a lot of people that need a home. They need a place where they can kind of relate. So that is why I started the channel. Plus, I was promoting Tulsi Gabbard's presidential campaign for quite some time, and obviously I am no longer doing that because Tulsi dropped out and endorsed Joe Biden. So I am now even more of a political refugee than I was before.
Yeah, so you disagreed with that decision of hers, right?
Yes, and I have taken a real beating for just being honest. Look, I understand that she signed a pledge. All the candidates did, and there's also a sore loser clause, which means that they cannot go off and run as a third-party candidate. I'm not sure in the case, though, if it's a legal or binding type agreement where they can sue you if you decide you want to go and run as a green or libertarian or something like that. So my big issue with the way she went out, and you can watch the interview she did with Jimmy Dore, it was sad. I mean, both Jimmy and Steph toward the end of it looked like they were going to cry. Because, I mean, this was just, she started to talk like just a deflective politician. And
yeah, they were very
that's
heartbroken.
Not the Tulsi. Yeah. So that isn't the Tulsi that I got to know during the campaign. Not literally know her, but just watching her. I know people that actually worked with her up in New Hampshire. I know one diehard supporter, and she's just devastated. She's just quit. She's just out after what she went through. So anyway, I've done a little bit of a pivot now. I've actually been talking about third parties and what might happen since probably last June or July. So it's just the natural progression of where I was going to go if this turned out like I thought it would. And unfortunately, it did.
Yeah, now Bernie's out, and a lot of us progressives or anti-establishment people are left in this gray zone where we don't know what to do. Some people are gonna write Bernie in, some people are gonna write Tulsi in, other people are gonna go third party like how you are gonna do. Other people are just gonna stay home, and other people are just confused. They don't know what they're gonna do. So I think we all need to unify around one decision so that our voice could be more powerful and more heard. I think that the third party option is the best option we can do, but there's still going to be some divide there. Some people are going to go libertarian or green party. So what do you think? Why are you advocating for a third party vote?
Well, I just don't know what else you can do. Here's the thing. On two occasions now, the last two election cycles, Bernie Sanders has tried to take over the Democratic Party. Politicians like AOC got into the Democratic Party, and at the very beginning, they seemed to be progressive or independent and working class oriented and so forth. But then there's this assimilation that takes place where they begin to lose some of their identity, and some of that, that fire that they had when they first started tends to wear off. Bernie this time around really was not an inspirational candidate to me. I liked, obviously, much of his platform I thought was fantastic, but then things like free speech, the Julian Assange issue, he did not address at all, not one time. And the big one, the big elephant in the room was Russiagate, where he was actually using talking points from MSNBC and other places. And then what was ironic was during one of the debates, I think it was Michael Bloomberg who said that Bernie was a Russian agent. So that didn't do him any good at all. And Tulsi, kind of the same thing in a way, except that she was for free speech, and she did call out, the media for ignoring Julian Assange and so forth. But then, as I talked about at the very end, things just went exactly 180 degrees. So the reason I advocate for a third party is I'll use Jill Stein. Her quote to me rings true, is like, you can't have a revolution in a counter-revolutionary party.
Yeah.
So it's basically, if your vehicle, if your car and your driver, which is going to be Tom Perez in the DNC, they're going to take you to neoliberalville, whether you want to go there or not. You might be in the front seat of the car, you might have a better view from where you're sitting, but guess where you're going to go? You're going to end up in the same place. And quite honestly, it's if you weren't convinced in 2016 that we needed to do this, I don't know, in 2020, after doing this a second time, I get it that people are exhausted and they're frustrated, but now is the time. It's April. It's only April. You've got a good 6 months of organizing and looking at who's on the ballot and finding out what the platform is. And for me, it's the Green Party platform. If you look at it, it's kind of like the Bernie platform on steroids.
Yeah, they're offering everything that Bernie was offering plus some, especially on foreign policy and environmental policies. Like they're actually trying to ban fracking. Like Bernie, I don't think some of his environmental policies weren't going to get rid of that all the way. And it is sad to see that Bernie and AOC and Ilhan Omar, they were, Justice Democrats, they were put there to transform the Democratic Party, but it seems like the Democratic Party is transforming them. And the thing you were saying about Bernie and Russiagate, Jimmy Dore said that Bernie pretty much Russiagated himself there. We could go on and on about all the faults that Bernie did during this campaign. He definitely was not the independent revolutionary that he presented himself to be in 2016. He seemed to be more so another Democrat. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think it was, you don't have to agree with everything Tucker Carlson says, but on one of his shows, he said that Bernie Sanders was the lamest revolutionary he's ever seen. And he went into detail about how if you're a revolutionary, you're talking in language that is starkly different. It's just more vivid, and you've got fire and you've got passion. You're not saying all the time, my good friend Joe and all of these things. I mean, Joe Biden may be his friend, and that's okay, and I'm not saying he can't be friends with Joe Biden, but to continuously bring it up in a way that makes his supporters think, well, wait a minute, this guy's supposed to be fighting for what we believe in, and he's talking so nice. I mean, at the very end of it, if he loses and he wants to be gracious and say, good luck, Joe Biden, I've known Joe Biden for a long time, he's a friend of mine, blah, 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 blah. It's the way Tulsi went out too. It's the same thing. It's like, hey, if you're going to do this, why are you doing it before the end of the campaign? Why are you making this a thing where people start to suspect that you really don't have the fire in your belly to take on the establishment? Quite honestly, Bruno, he's 78 years old. he's been in politics for a very long time, and I'm a guy who I think believes in term limits. I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about that issue recently, but I think he's been in Washington, D.C. for an awfully long time. He's probably made some friends, and it's not a bad thing to make friends, but those relationships, I think, they can obscure your mission, I think, if you're just too focused on trying to get along with people. I know Tulsi talked a lot about, making toffee and bringing it to other people so they'll listen to your point of view. But we need to see here. I know this is probably going to be a little bit of a tangent, but the reason that people who like Donald Trump is that he's a bomb thrower. Every single day he's throwing bombs out. Now, you and I may disagree with what he's throwing out there, but the people who like him because he's going to fight.
He seems authentic to them, and so it's reassuring to them that he's actually going to fight for their issues.
Right. So Bernie playing Mr. Nice Guy here wasn't what his supporters wanted, and Tulsi Gabbard, who had a lot of fire during the campaign and was calling out Hillary Clinton, remember the Queen of Warmongers. I mean, she said some really cool, impressive stuff during the campaign, but then at the end just fizzled like a dud firecracker, and you're sitting there going, what just happened? So third parties at this point, to give you an answer to your original question, I think it's the only mechanism we have left. I've been telling people you can't reform the Democratic Party. Some people, even Jimmy Dore the other night, said you might have better luck trying to get into the Republican Party, which is crazy.
Yeah, because they're actually
to convince their constituents.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think he's wrong, because Trump is willing to do like a temporary Medicare for all. He's ready to start doling out a second or third stimulus. I don't think Biden or Pelosi would do this. Maybe they would under the pressure if they were in control of the government. Maybe they would, and maybe they're just being contrarian because they hate Trump. But see how that works? The country is screwed by this tribal nonsense. It's just, I hate it. I hate it. I wish if Trump decided tomorrow that he was going to do Medicare for all, the Democrats would oppose it.
Everything Trump does is bad. They have to oppose everything he does in their eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I am for doing the authentic, real, when I say third way, a lot of times people interpret that as like the independent and nonpartisan thing. I'm talking about going around the current two-party system, and whether it's you and I doing our own media, or doing our own news per se, and telling other people about it. This is the way, the future that people are going to hopefully get some of their information, rather than going to MSNBC or Fox News or whatever. So be it. We've got to start somewhere.
Yep. So what can we do to unify other progressives, specifically the ones with the big voices and the platforms on indie media, like MCSC Network and Convo Couch and Jimmy Dore, Kim Iverson? How can we get everybody to agree to do something? Because I remember seeing you on Twitter getting into an argument with other people about choosing third party or writing in Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. That's a really good question. If you go down that list of people, and I've tried there have been times, I will admit, on YouTube where I have called out certain commentators. I'm actually friends with Craig Pasta over on Convo. He and I have kind of conversed a little bit back and forth. I was supposed to be on his show, and he's on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast, and it just didn't work out. It's really tough because everybody has got such an independent streak. Kim Iverson, what she does, I think she brings a lot of people who are probably maybe even a little bit more conservative, maybe in other philosophical ways they're a little bit more conservative than the average progressive voter. but she breaks things down in a way that's really helpful.
Yeah.
I think she's a media star, kind of, and she had a background in radio broadcasting, and obviously she's nice to look at. I'm just going to be blunt about it, so a lot of people tune in to see Kim, and she offers a really good perspective. She'd be a person to try to reach with this stuff because I think her audience is growing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Dore has a real hang-up with Howie Hawkins, who is in the Green Party and who is the contender, like the front runner right now. And he eviscerated him on a show, and it was really bad. And I don't know I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if it's a personal issue. He's talked
Probably
a lot
the
about
Russiagate stuff.
Yeah. Jimmy talks a lot about the Peace and Freedom Party, which I looked that up, and it's kind of in California, but it's not really anywhere else.
Yeah.
What I can tell, maybe it's growing. Nico is great. Nico is a really strong voice out there, and he's had Dario on his show like I did yesterday. Nico would be a guy I think you might be able to convince. But how do you unify? First of all, you've got to, things have to happen in a way where people finally make a political calculation at the end of it, and they say, you know what, there's no Democrat that I can vote for, which is true. There's no Republican that I'm going to vote for, although I do hear that there are a few Bernie people that might go back to Trump. Some of them had come over for Bernie, and it's a weird coalition there, but I think, again, it's about the idea that Bernie doesn't fight for stuff, and even if Trump does like 5% of stuff that independents want and like, he's going to fight for it. So they're going to say, it's either the guy who's got onset dementia or Trump. And Trump's a train wreck when he gets up and has a speech, but I don't know. There are people that, like I said before, that believe that he's fighting for whatever it is that they think is important to them. But I think there's a huge opportunity for a third party right now because you've got 2016 all over again, except Hillary had most of her faculties, I think, whereas Biden does not, although Hillary, there was a lot of questions about her overall health going into that election, if you remember. But
Yeah.
Biden, here's the thing, if the Democrats, there's more and more rumors about how they're going to replace Biden prior to the convention or at the convention, that is a real possibility, and that's not a conspiracy theory or anything.
They can choose whoever they
This
want.
guy over the last, the couple of weeks that I've seen him try to do television, try to do interviews, he's a train wreck. He's mangling, or he's jumbling sentences. I'm sure you've seen it.
Yep.
And that might be a game changer, because if you do bring someone in who's, articulate, say they bring in like a guy who can speak clearly, say they bring like an Obama type character back in, who can speak, like Deval Patrick is sitting out there, all right? He ran briefly for president. I know this is a wild theory. It would be like Barack Obama Part 2, if they were to say, hey, Deval, you're articulate and you're basically, you come from the same stock as Obama, and it's like having Obama and Mitt Romney as one person, and some of the country might go for that. And it scares me because you're not going to get any of your agenda that the independents and progressives want. You're going to get pretty much the same stuff we have now, but you're going to get a nice man who speaks and is empathetic and so forth. And apparently there are a lot of Americans that that's what's most important to them. So I don't know.
Yeah. I was speaking to Israel S. Daly of Big Talk, Little Talk the other day about how we also need to coalesce people who are apolitical or people who consider themselves moderate, who are blue no matter who, like these suburban people, and even Republicans and conservatives. I think a lot of these people will agree that we need to get money out of politics And so I think one thing that everyone, you, me, everybody who has an indie media platform needs to do is remind everybody, what is the main goal here? The main goal is to get money out of politics. Um, so I think that's one thing that could be helpful, is to just constantly remind people what the goal is. Money out of politics, money out of politics.
Right.
All these politicians, Republican or Democrat, they're not going to represent you because they're getting more money from these corporations.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's like, I was having this conversation, I mentioned this earlier, with this libertarian guy over on Twitter who followed me, probably
Yeah.
because of mostly the Tulsi stuff, and there were a lot of libertarians that wanted Tulsi. And he and I disagree on economic policy, but I listed off like 6 or 7 things. The surveillance state, Big Brother, basically taking your information. During this COVID thing, there's all kinds of stuff coming out almost by the hour about how the government is going to use this information against us, possibly. Reforming the banks, that's another huge issue
Yeah.
that crosses party lines, breaking up the banks, understanding what they're doing to the monetary system right now. Libertarians, conservatives even, and Greens, all of those people agree on those sorts of things. So I think finding maybe a half dozen issues where, and this is what I did with Dario, I said, there are a lot of issues that cross over that people don't realize. Free speech, very important to conservatives and to what I call real old school liberals, who knew that you had to defend the most egregious of speech and not just put it in a category, hey, if I disagree with you, it's hate speech. And hate speech is very Orwellian to me. It sounds like now I have to shut up because you've deemed me a hater and a hate speech person.
Yeah.
When I'm just espousing, if you say that, for instance, in Syria, I don't believe the narrative, that the common narrative about how, Assad gassed his own people. I don't believe that. Well, you're a Russian agent, you're a conspiracy theorist, and right there I get shut down for having an opinion. So I think if you coalesce around, and you made a good point there, if you can sell some big ticket issues like corruption, like the way the banks work right now, student loan debt. My wife has close to $100,000 in student loan debt. And Dario Hunter, the guy I interviewed yesterday, mentioned that he had, I think he said, tens of thousands or maybe even hundreds of thousands. I'll have to go back and look at the interview. But there are thousands of Americans who got duped into going to college and then getting out, and then there's no job there waiting for them that's going to pay off their debt and allow them a decent living. So I don't know. I mean, there's a lot that can be done to coalesce. You talk about the suburbs and the soccer moms and all these different people out there. You have to convince Republicans that they've been voting against their own economic issues because they're holding on to their cultural issues so tightly. And by the way, the left has to do a much better job. Because I'm a Christian. I make no bones about it. I'm not a racist. I'm not a homophobe. I'm not any of these things. And yet, all day long, that's the caricature. And you need to reach out to everybody, because you'd be surprised at there are a lot of Christians that are compassionate and that want to help people, and that you'd be surprised the kind of coalition you can build if you change the way your language goes out and how that's branded and so forth. So that's just my opinion about it.
No, that's good, because focusing too much on the SJW stuff, like the social issues, is repellent to a lot of people who consider themselves conservative. But if we focus more on the economic issues, which is what Bernie Sanders initially did back in 2016,
right,
that's how you expand. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't seem to understand that, and they're too focused on this equality and fairness for everybody, which I agree with, but it's not. It's gonna scare some people away from your movement if you that's your main message. The main message should be, anti-corruption.
Right.
And I remember Kim Iverson talked about in the video that in order to have like a more formidable third party is to have it be like an anti-establishment party where we just unify like the libertarians and the Green Party people and all other people. Do you think that that's possible to do, to unify libertarians and Green Party people and other people who consider themselves independent?
Yeah, it's going to be, see, the libertarians and the Greens, like I say, there's a lot of intersection between the two parties, but there are some really big differences that I don't know if that can be reconciled. And where it really lies is in economic policy. And I used to be a straight up libertarian a few years ago. I just thought, hey, the free market's going to figure this out. It's supply and demand. It's survival of the fittest. It's whoever has the best ideas wins. But I've seen this economy, and you know this for a fact, the difference between those at the top and those even in the middle, never mind at the bottom, is staggering, and it keeps growing and growing and growing. So I'm kind of in a place where I'd like to see an FDR-like president come in and just say, look, we'll have the free market. Don't worry. The free market's still going to be there, but I'm going to put tight controls on the banks. I'm going to put regulations in so you can't get scammed. If you go bankrupt, the credit card company's not going to come back in 6 months and try to give you another credit card because that's stupid. That's right. Shows that they're predatory lenders. The libertarians believe pretty much that the free market is going to solve all your problems and that private charity is going to take over. Whereas the Green Party says, hey, you know what? Government has to legislate some of this charity. So that's how you have to look at it. And that would be in the form of taxation. As soon as you say taxes, people run. I mean, in my own hometown here, they wanted to put another fire station in. And I'm thinking, I live in a big town that needs a fire station. And everybody ran around with signs saying that your taxes are going to go up, and there's no way that we can do this. And I'm thinking, my response time is more than 20 minutes from where the fire station is. I think we need a fire station, and I'm willing to pay extra taxes so I can have a fire station to protect me and my family. So I think people need to understand that if you're going to coalesce, the economic component of this, and you mentioned Bernie Sanders, he was getting support because people agreed, hey, Medicare for all sounds like a good idea. Hey, a Green New Deal, where there are thousands of green jobs available to people, entry-level jobs where they can build green components or get involved some other way in the green economy. Those are, I think, what this boils down to, Bruno, is how you sell it, how you pitch it. And understanding that certain people have free market ears and other people have been raised in an environment where they're taught that countries like Sweden and Denmark, places in just various places over in Europe have kind of the best of all things in all worlds. Like they have a hybrid economy. And I think you can do both. But again, it's real hard. It's like, what's that expression, herding cats, where you get libertarians and Greens. The Greens know that they've got the libertarians beat on economic policy, but if you talk to libertarians, they're going to tell you that the Greens are going to bankrupt the country because their proposals cost too much and there's no way to pay for it, as the usual response. And see, Bernie had answers to those questions, like taxing Wall Street transactions. He had really good answers, and I think you can convince people. I'll never forget Bernie when he went to Fox News and did that town hall, and people said, what's he doing going to Fox News? It's like hostile territory. He went in there, and it was one of the best moments of the campaign, where all these so-called conservatives were raising their hands for Medicare for all. Yeah, I'd rather ditch my own insurance because that's a big tax on me all year round. Pay some extra taxes, but compared to what I'd be paying for health insurance, this is a better deal. So I think it's how you explain it. It's doable, but man, it's like the struggle of the century. It's you ask a really good question because I'm not sure how to bridge the gap there, but I do think that again, you focus on the commonality.
Yeah.
What do the two parties have in common? You like those two circles. Where do those circles intersect? And then really focus and hammer on those issues.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really hoping that we can all advocate for that. Like the ones with a big platform can advocate for that. But we need to communicate this to them. So speaking of people with big platforms, you and I have been agreeing that Jimmy Dore is a voice of reason during these times. So what would you say right now about Jimmy Dore?
Jimmy is right now kind of channeling a lot of the frustration and anger. Plus, not only is he doing that, but he's like he always seems to me like he's one step ahead of where everybody else is. On, like I told you about how he's starting to say things like Republicans are probably going to be more willing to listen to some of these things than Democrats, which is really screwed up. But he had a guest on the other day who said that out loud, and Jimmy agreed, and he threw his hands. I could tell when Jimmy's agreeing because he does this, and he's all smiling and stuff like Eureka, you hit the jackpot. I think he's a man that really cares about the working class, and he realizes he's kind of, this is what I say to my wife, he's kind of seen how they make the sausage, and he's got like insight, and he knows that this is crap and that we can do better, but yet we keep putting out the same, politicians. I mean, the Tulsi Gabbard interview, like I said, he and Steph were like heartbroken at the end of that because they supported Tulsi and they gave her a platform when NBC and all these other major outlets were just like, no, denied, blackout time. You can't be on the debate. Sorry, even though you made the criteria, we're going to black you out. So Jimmy Dore, he is kind of like, to use a biblical analogy, he's kind of like an Old Testament prophet crying out in the wilderness and yelling and screaming at the establishment and swearing. I mean, the guy, I mean, there are times where my kids walking around and I'm like, all right, I got to turn the volume down. But I'm internally loving him because he's channeling the frustration and the anger of so many people who are no longer being, the great forgotten man and woman. They're just not being represented. So he's got 700,000 subscribers or so. I'd love to see him get over 1 million. And I think you need to keep retweeting his stuff, making sure that you're watching his stuff, especially now when everything is in lockdown mode. I think it's very important that we support him in his efforts and tell people, if you haven't. I know a lot of Trump people that watch him faithfully because they just again, it's that whole he's fighting for us, and you're not seeing that.
It seems genuine to them.
Yeah,
and
so we're all bland compared to Jimmy Dore. I can't compete with that. I just do the best I can, and occasionally I do an impression here and there, and people are laughing at me. But the thing about Jimmy Dore is he's here for a reason at this time. I believe in that. And again, he says I'm a jag-off comedian. That's what he always says, and if I can say this, then anybody can say it. I went out and bought the book that he read by Thomas Frank called Listen Liberal.
I got that too.
Did you read it?
Yeah, I read it.
Yeah, I mean, it talks basically about how the Democratic Party destroyed itself in the 1990s under Bill Clinton, and it became about the meritocracy. It's like all about, are you one of these ivory tower people, because then you're a competent person, and the truck drivers and the the repairmen who we need and depend on, especially right now, these are the people that make the country work and keep the lights on and so forth. It shows how the Democratic Party just walked away from those people. And that's why, the Green Party, again, not to keep harping on the Green Party, but the Libertarian Party will tell you that, we're going to let you keep more of your income. The Green Party is going to tell you that we're going to try to work on these systemic problems that exist, like income inequality, the environment. You don't hear, the Libertarians are kind of like, yeah, free market will fix the environment because they'll invent something that eventually will fix the energy problem and we won't be emitting anything into the atmosphere. The Green Party says, hey, we got like 10 years to figure this out. Let's hurry up and get moving on it. And by the way, no more war, because war exacerbates the problem, because you have to have cooperation among nations. It's what Dario Hunter talked about yesterday. Mm-hmm. And I agree with all these things. And you're talking to somebody who was far more conservative a few years ago on a lot of these issues.
Yeah. The way that I see Jimmy Dore is that his message resonates with everyone who's just sick and tired of this system. And looking back at how he was on the Young Turks and how I mainly agreed with him and then followed him after that to his channel and found other people who were saying the same things that he was saying but in a calmer way. It's really reassuring to me about my gut feelings about things. And also after reading more books and stuff, it's also reassuring and looking back at history. Jimmy's he's right about a lot of these things. So what else was I going to say?
Well, there are a number of other commentators you mentioned.
Okay. So the other commentators. Yeah. So I mentioned like Kim Iverson and Nico House and the Combo Couch. These are people who generally agree with us more, but we need to also coalesce the ones that we're not really agreeing with, but are also considering themselves progressive, like the Young Turks and like Humanist Report and those people. So how can we convince them about what we're trying to do here? Should we just keep reminding them, look, our goal is to get money out of politics. You really got to stop focusing on these SJW stuff. But it seems like they're just so dogmatic with this stuff that they're not willing to listen.
No. When I first started doing my channel, I subscribed to the Humanist Report for a little while, and that didn't last long. The TYT stuff, unfortunately, I got in after I think Jimmy Dore had already left, and I watched some clips of Cenk and Anna and so forth, and really kind of disturbing, especially because I was a Tulsi Gabbard fan, and they were just not having Tulsi Gabbard at all. You mentioned the dogmatic nature. There are kind of different levels of independence, or I would consider both humanist and TYT more in line with the neoliberal order and establishment. I mean, I can almost guarantee you that both of those platforms, at the end of the day, toward September, October, they're going to start telling you, hey, Joe Biden, he's our only hope. You got to go vote for Joe Biden. And I'm going to and Jimmy too, I'm sure he will just absolutely go crazy. Cenk has even said, he always says very mixed things, like he has been critical of AOC as of late, which is a good development, but then when push comes to shove, if it's Biden against Trump, he's, rather than try to go third party or just, maybe I would say abstain if you really don't want to vote, but he's going to tell you to go vote for Joe Biden. And that, to me, is if you're a progressive, you're a so-called progressive, and you're enthusiastic about Joe Biden, I don't know how to answer your question. I don't know I just don't know how you bridge that gap. You say dogmatic. I say there's a shred of this any blue will do thing going on, because they just think if they got a D in front of their name, that's going to fix the problem.
It's such an old way of thinking.
Because they don't like, here's the thing, they just don't, it's like the media. They just don't like Donald Trump, and I get it. I totally get it. I understand where they're coming from, but I said this in one of my first videos or tweets or whatever. I said, not liking Donald Trump is not a policy proposal. It's not a platform issue. It's a personality thing, and Trump, I think, doubles down because he knows it's driving these people crazy, and I don't think it's good for the country. But it's not going to solve the problem if your only goal is to just get rid of Trump. Because remember, Obama, all the things that they get on Trump for, like the immigration stuff, Obama was doing it. If you didn't like the deportations, Obama was doing it. If you didn't like a lot of those policies, and by the way, I am not for a real lax immigration system. I think we could do a lot better in welcoming immigrants here, but we still need to have a border. And I think most people that you talk to are going to also, in their gut, they're going to tell you that at the end of the day. I tell people, do you leave the door of your house wide open, or do you have a lock on it? Do you have a doorbell? There's certain things that make sense, and I think at times we go so far in a direction to try to just be against Trump that we lose perspective. Bernie Sanders in 2014 was not for immigration the way he was in this cycle. He believed it lowered wages, you had more unskilled workers, and you had people that were already here who were struggling to find jobs, and then you're going to import more cheap labor. And to me, Cynthia McKinney, who used to be a congresswoman who's very progressive, says the same thing. She's like, I don't get it. Why would we do this? So I don't know. I went on a tangent there, but to answer your question about Humanist Report and TYT, that's a tough sell because TYT
Sam Cedar especially,
funded, and Humanist is now in TYT, right? Didn't he join, or isn't he affiliated with them?
Yeah, he's more affiliated now with them. Also, people like Rational National, Majority Report, and Michael Brooks, they're very, very dogmatic. It's this Trump derangement syndrome, like you were mentioning without coining it. But they're the ones. So they're the ones with the loudest, with the biggest platform. TYT has over 4 million subscribers, so I think they could really make a change because people listened to them in 2016 with Bernie, and now we really need to convince them, but I don't know how that's going to happen, so that we can all unify around this decision on how we're going to overthrow the establishment.
Right. I wish I had, I wish I had good answers here. I mean, these are really good questions. I can say that. TYT obviously is a platform that gets funding, and it's not just self-funded like it used to be. So, the person who's doing the funding, they obviously probably have an ideology, just like Rupert Murdoch does. Just like all the big wigs at various television networks have a philosophy, whether it's Jeff Bezos or whoever, Comcast and so forth. And it's sad because it's, again, the oligarchs, to use a common word that's out there, the oligarchs end up having control over the people, and the people try to rise up, and they say, yes, you can talk about these things here, but if you start talking about these things over here, well, we're going to tell you not to do that, and to focus on the things that we can kind of agree on. And keep in mind, Donald Trump is a ratings boom for every one of these channels. TYT loves to destroy Trump every day. Trump will get up on the podium, hasn't even said anything yet, oh my gosh, look at the way he looks, look at his face. I mean, people are, yeah, there's a lot. There's his appearance is an easy target for on Donald Trump, but again, at the end of the day, this misses the point. We're all here, the working class, the people that are struggling, the people who believe that climate change is a real threat to the world. Okay, and you're worrying about the way Trump words a tweet. You're spending your whole show talking about that he used the there as in the possessive there instead of there as in the other there. So this is the kind of stuff I see all the time, and I'm thinking to myself, man, how are we going to unify when this is just a cash cow for them? This is a guy who probably didn't even think he was going to win the election. Hillary was such a bad candidate, and he ends up winning. And then now he's implementing the stuff that he campaigned on for the most part. And do I like Donald Trump? There are things I do like about Trump. I do like the fact that he fights. He's relentless. He'll tear his opponents to shreds. He doesn't mince words. And you need somebody who's independent and progressive who is like the answer to that. Jesse Ventura, who's out there, who I wish would jump in and run for president, he would be the answer to Donald Trump in that regard, because nobody is going to be more bombastic, and nobody is going to take any prisoners more prisoners than Jesse Ventura, former Navy SEAL and professional wrestler, and a guy who currently has his own show on RT America and just got back from Mexico. So I'm still waiting to see what Jesse will do, because it's rumored that he might run in the Green Party. He doesn't have a lot of time left if he wants to do that. But I don't know of any other person who's out there who can challenge Trump like that, kind of change the dynamic and not be this boring character where you have to just kind of be inspired by the message. People seem to want a personality with charisma.
They want a strong figure, someone who they can trust.
Yeah.
What do you think about The Rising? Do you think that they're a platform that's able to unify people? I mean, they have Saagar, who's more conservative, and Crystal Ball. Saagar's like the new age conservative. So I think I see their stats going up. So I'm hoping people could jump the ship from TYT and go over to The Rising just to get their consciousness go up. Because the stuff that TYT does, like what you were mentioning, that's attacking Trump over the littlest things. That's only going to repel the conservatives away.
Yeah. Well, Saagar and Crystal Ball are probably the best thing to happen to media since Jimmy Dore, I'll say. When I first started watching them, Crystal Ball, this is just my own take on Crystal Ball. She can be, her presentation, her voice and so forth, at times, I'm a child of the 80s, so, to me, she kind of sounds like a valley girl from California when she talks. But with that said, I think it's disarming and friendly, and it certainly would get somebody listening who would watch Anna Kasparian, for instance, and go, oh, this woman gives me a headache, but then I can go watch Crystal, and Crystal will present it, and she's incredibly insightful and articulate, and that she's representing the more independent progressive side. Populism is what they're both kind of espousing over there. Saagar is more on the right, but he's certainly in agreement with a lot of the things that you and I have been talking about. He may be conservative on fiscal policy. I've never really heard his whole presentation, like his whole philosophy on things, because he agrees with Crystal a lot, and he defends her, and they both are kind of hammering at what I call the Saagar comes from the populist right, and she comes from the populist left, and neither of them care about identity politics, which rocks. I love that. Neither of them care about intersectionality, like how many boxes do you check? They care about policy, and if you happen to be a Latino, a Latina, or an African American, a gay African American guy, it doesn't matter. It's just, what do you believe in? It's like, what are your beliefs and values? And I think that's kind of like the new post-partisan, put this stuff aside, but unfortunately, all the people on TYT and the Humanist Report and the Biden campaign itself and the whole resistance movement, that stuff is bigger than I think you and I probably understand, and it's scary because those are the people that are going to go out and vote in droves. And this is why Joe Biden, by the way, is the nominee. And even though I know the voting machines are screwed up in California and all over the country, I don't think they're as screwed up as the amount of votes that Biden got versus Bernie. So as much as I want to say the whole thing was rigged at the voting booth, I think it's hard to make that claim based on the states that Bernie won in 2016 versus what he won in 2020. And I just think his campaign obviously didn't have the same level of enthusiasm. So getting back to your original premise, though, about these media outlets, I do think The Rising, I really enjoy watching it. I typically watch 2 or 3 of their videos per day because I subscribed and they pop up in my YouTube stream and so forth. And I'm like, I go to YouTube to watch something else. I'm like, oh, I got to find out what they're talking about. And I will watch it because these guys, they're not antagonistic either. They're not like they have this personal hatred for Trump.
Yeah, they try to be as objective as they can.
Yeah, so I can watch that and not go, oh, these guys just hate Trump and they're just going to tear Trump a new one again today. And it's like the comedians on these late night shows. They just, all they do every night, this is what I mean about Trump. I mean, he's kind of like a cash cow for all of these different platforms that basically make money because they sell the hate every night. Okay, you got to hate Trump. And the Trump people, why do you think they're so loyal to Trump? You hate my guy. You hate my president. And it's making me more angry, and I'm definitely going to the polls. And man, am I going to pull that lever, and I'll do it twice if I can. That's the kind of enthusiasm we need, as far as an independent, more progressive-minded person who will end these stupid wars that we've been in, who will really look at the climate, who won't be like, yeah, climate change is a hoax, You need to have the opposite of that. You need to have somebody come back and say something like, well, have you been outside lately? Have you noticed the temperature's a little warmer? I mean, just somebody who can come back with sort of a friendly but, a little bit of a wise guy response, just so people will start to listen because, again, we need somebody who can counter that whole Trump thing, and it's energy, and you may think it's negative energy, but it's still enough of it appeals to people in the country that feel that nobody is out there really representing their interests. So it's unfortunate, but issues tend to take a back seat to this stuff, and it's pop culture. And one of the reasons Trump is president is because he was on television.
Yeah.
People knew who he was. He had 100% name ID, and you need somebody from the Hollywood left who's more progressive could come along. The problem is they're going to be neoliberal, and we need somebody who's more Bernie and Tulsi and Dario and that kind of thing, and who's also charismatic and who can really unite and coalesce a movement. So anyway, long-winded. running out of air here, Bruno.
That was really well said, and yeah. So, any last things that you want to say before we close this off?
Well, I appreciate what you're doing. I've got another friend, I don't know if you know him, Charles. He does a channel called The Vigilant Independent. I've been on his channel a couple of times, and he's a Carolina boy. He's an upstart. He's trying to get to where he gets monetized, and I've been on his show a couple of times, and he and I agree on a lot of things. All I could say is that if you people are out there watching this and you want to start a channel, I don't care about competition. Obviously, I think more of us, the better.
Yeah.
We can basically start our own little, call it a network. It's not a real network, but it's an actual network of folks who believe that the system is kind of broken, and when you're pushed up against the wall rather than quit, you find a way around the car wreck. Because we watched the DNC car wreck twice now. If you're a Bernie fan, you're a Tulsi fan this time around. But especially if you're a Bernie Sanders fan, I put a tweet out yesterday. I said, I don't understand why Bernie fans aren't joining the Green Party in droves, just out of principle. You don't even, say you don't know much about it, but you look at their platform and you go, this is the stuff I believe in. Excuse me. I don't have COVID-19, so you don't have to worry about that. Just talking too much. So I think in the long run, what we all have to do is do our own little part, whether it's talking to our family, putting videos out, being on Twitter, trying to be civil with people. I struggle with this on Twitter, admittedly. I have a problem.
It's hard on Twitter. It's easy to get mad.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, some of these former Tulsi people, I'm just throwing it in here at the end, some of the most difficult people I've ever dealt with. And you throw common sense and you say, well, she's not running anymore. Well, I'm going to write her in. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's not going to help because she's not running. Her name won't be on the ballot, and I guarantee you that we have enough trouble in this country counting ballots as it is, and you're going to do a write-in vote for Tulsi Gabbard. I said, if you got a Green Party candidate or Libertarian or another independent that shows up and you believe in what they're espousing, put your energy into that. You can be faithful to a fault. I mean, these people that are going to continue to go out for Bernie Sanders in the middle of a pandemic, I'm like, why? Why are you going to do that? He just dropped out. He's not going to win. He has no. He said he's going to support Joe Biden for president. I think that should be a wake-up call. And again, I'm doing the Green Party thing because I think it's a logical move. I agree with about 80 to 90% of the platform. I think the party is perceived kind of fringy right now, and it's got to work on its image, that it really talks about, you talk about corruption, for instance. They need to talk about that, the living wages, green jobs, the Medicare for all, these certain, like I said, maybe a half dozen issues that are going to appeal to a wide variety of Americans, and frame it in language that doesn't scare people. I mean, if you're saying, hey, I'm for an eco-socialist New Deal, that scares some people because they go, socialist? Whoa, what do you mean? And me and Dario had a brief little conversation about the S word, as I like to say. There are a lot of Americans that are scared by that word, and you have to explain what that means. It does not mean that the government is coming to your house to take your children or to block you from everyday freedoms that you currently have. But there are a lot of people that, like Trump, he's bombastic. He'll say, Bernie Sanders is a communist. And Mike Bloomberg did that at the debate as well, called him a communist. And so these are things that scare middle America. This scares the people in the suburbs, as you say, who, hey, they just want normalcy. They don't want crazy. And if you start talking crazy, they're going to say, I'll just vote for Trump, or I'll stay home, or I'll even vote for Biden, because Biden's going to bring back the normalcy that we had when Obama was president, even though he had 8 years of stagnation under Barack Obama that people conveniently forgot about. So that's how I'm wrapping up, Bruno. I appreciate the time today.
Yeah. So just so you can know more about us, I'm trying to do my part by reaching out to people who are apolitical, because my colleagues from this channel here, they talk about pop culture and sports. So we're hoping that they can get attracted to the things that they say about sports, because they're great sports analysts. And they also are very in touch with what's happening in pop culture, and they report on that. So we're hoping to grow that way and attract those people so they can get an objective perspective of what's happening in politics through me, and grow our movement like that. So I really appreciate you coming on, Dave. Thank you so much. People, please follow the Radical Independent, subscribe to him. You can find him on Twitter on, what's your Twitter name?
It's just my regular name, which is David Spurrier. It's at David Spurrier, and it'll say, obviously, my handle is the Radical Independent at David Spurrier. So that's where I am. And again, the YouTube channel. I'm also over on Rockfin as well, which is a
Nice.
cool little platform over there.
Yeah, we're trying to go over there too.
Yeah, it's the cryptocurrency thing right now is it's a little sluggish. You're basically working pro bono for very little amounts, but the hope is that someday once this all turns around, that crypto is going to go up in value, and the videos are going to be worth a lot more when you do them over there. But you get free speech over there. You're not going to get censored. You're not going to get any of your stuff pulled down. You can swear. You can be derogatory. Not that I try to be kind of family friendly. It's because I have a 6-year-old and a 15-year-old in my house, so I tend to be a little less. I do swear, but mostly in the car. So, but in any event, yeah, sounds like you're going to do like a Joe Rogan type of thing, which I think would be awesome. Joe Rogan is respected because he's kind of apolitical, and people go, "Wow, Joe Rogan." The other day, he was just really bummed out. He's like, they're going to make us vote for Biden. He's another guy who's got a great platform and appeals to these non-political types. So good luck with that. Hope it works out.
Thank you. And again, thank you again for coming on.
Right.
And we'll end the video there. Thanks for watching that segment of Hear Me Out. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell down below so you can get the latest on sports, pop culture, and progressive politics. Stay informed.